Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Mindfully Curious podcast. I am your host, Steph. I am so happy to be back with you this week. I took a little bit of a week off last week because, as you may have heard from me on prior episodes, I've been dealing with a lot of resistance from life. And, well, sometimes it is good to take a little bit of a beat breaker, a pattern interrupt. Needed to refresh myself. And I didn't really do anything special, didn't go on vacation. I continued working on some of my other projects, which honestly, having so many projects going at once is also something that could be overwhelming. But anyway, I'm happy to be back here, and I am so excited to share this episode with my sister, Itzy Ramirez. Itzy is a seasoned user experience designer, and she is based in New York City. She is also a woman of Mexican heritage, so during this conversation you will hear us talk a lot about that. The subject of the conversation: decolonizing design. I have been so interested by all of the hype around this word of decolonize or decolonization. It almost sounds like colonics. But speaking about colonics, when you think about colonizing, it means somebody came over and probed you without consent. But I may be saying that as a joke, but it kind of is true when, well, a lot of the settling that went down back in the day, especially in America, from European colonizers, was not a kind process. It was kind of really violent and very oriented in, let's replace the system that these people had with our better, and I am doing little quotation marks with my fingers right now. Let's teach this. You can hear my dog here. I might have to take a little breather here to get her to calm down. So if you hear some really heavy breathing underneath the talking, just know that that's my dog, who loves to make guest appearances on the podcast. But anyway, these colonizers were coming in to America and being like, okay, yeah, you guys are savages. Your system is whack. Really want your gold and the resources. And your women are not that bad. So let's replace your systems with our right, better system. And let's get rid of all of your, old beliefs and savage type of ways. And the thing there that I find so interesting is that idea of right and wrong. All right, I had to go get the dog a carrot. She was just getting too wild. But anyway, going back to what that word decolonize means and that feeling of this is what's right, this is what's wrong. Decolonize means to withdraw from / leaving it independent. So separate yourself from established an establishment, and going independent. And now let's think about decolonizing, that idea of good and bad. And y'all might have heard this saying of the devil you know is better than the devil that you don't know. And when we think about, hey, the devil we know is the system that's in place that, came from these colonizations that started building, and now we know, at least where I live, as the United States of America, and we are seeing currently how that system is no longer serving the best interest of everyone and everything. As a matter of fact, it is serving against us and against the whole planet, to be honest. And that has been a huge lesson for me in the last year or so. So, if you take anything from this episode, I hope that it is a little bit of courage and maybe inspiration on thinking about ways that you can go independent, whether it is going independent from cooking off a recipe, going independent of the way you manage your day. Perhaps it will be the way you express yourself artistically. And we will talk about how we have incorporated wisdom that we were told was not wisdom and to go against into the wisdom that we acquire through your typical channels such as college and modern society, and how bringing those two together in a creative way that makes sense for you can yield so much awesomeness for you. And if you've heard me talk about creativity, you know that I am very passionate about it, because to me, creativity is what weaves that path into what a lot of people like to call a world of abundance. And in this case, it's very visible how through creativity, an open mind, and your ability to weave lots of stories together, take what serves you and leave what doesn't, we are able to achieve a new level of freedom when we separate ourselves from these schools of thought or systems that are really in a way not aligned with us and limiting what we are able to do in this life. Sorry if I rambled a little bit. It's really important for me to not record these intros over and over. Just like the podcast, I want everything to be as close to live as possible. Keep it authentic. And without further ado, here is the conversation with the beautiful Itzy Ramirez. Don't record for like the first 10 minutes or so, just because I want to kind of set the space and make it safe before I like enter the recording. But then sometimes if it's just like, okay, it's been like a few minutes and the conversation is going, I'm like, just press record, because I don't want to have my rule impede like the flow of the conversation. So
oh yeah, nice, thank you. Yeah,
but it looks like it just did. So if you forget what you were saying, don't worry, I can go into my whole spiel.
no, yeah, I was saying I went on a trip to Guatemala because I had a friend and she had a project and she wanted me to like do a website, and we had a lot of communication problems with the teams out there, and she actually was kind enough to like send me out there and like pay for room and board, and I just had to take care of my expenses, and I saw this whole different world, and they were like Mayan community, and they held a ceremony there, and it was really beautiful, and that's where I really like got to connect to something that like I thought wasn't there anymore. That's what I was told, that it was like the Mayans had like vanished, and like that's what we are told in school and through like people, and it's like no, they're pretty much alive and happy in like Central America and different places in Mexico. Like indigenous people are still around and resisting. So it was really beautiful.
That's so cool that you got to experience that and see that with your own eyes. Because
Yeah.
me growing up in Mexico, again, my parents told me, oh, your grandma is, she's crazy with her rituals and her plant medicine and whatever. But it's funny because your story just reminds me of when I realized that, oh no, wait, natives are still around us. Is
Mm-hmm.
I was born in Mexico City, and the Aztecs and the Toltecs lived there,
Mm-hmm.
and the Mexicas. And the thing is, like, these people are still there. Like, they have relatives that know their
Mm-hmm.
lineage and that continue to participate in the traditions and hold the wisdom. And yes, there is something about resisting the new that does make them kind of outcast in a way where they did totally seem like, I don't know, that guy seems sketchy, you know? Like, I would rather go to a doctor that's going to give me pills that I know
Mm-hmm.
science, whatever.
Yeah.
And again, just going back to that reconciliation process, I feel like now with it seems like it's gotten popular to be native or to have some of these wisdom to connect with the earth. Plant medicine probably did it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's cool because now science is getting involved in all these rituals and ways of life and whatnot. And turns out, oh, they do have knowledge. Just like technology is
Mm-hmm.
helpful in
Exactly.
modern medicine and stuff, they
Mm-hmm.
too have stuff that is so not even just medicine for today, but something we're just truly lacking, which is spirituality. Well, at least in my humble opinion, that
Mm-hmm.
is the spirituality embedded into everything, the intention of living, of being, of connecting with yourself. And because of that, with everything else. And it's just like, oh my God, it's so exciting. And it also kind of makes me feel so stupid, but at least we've kind of figured it out. So let's go.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And I think a lot of it had to do with like colonization and the way that we kind of like were brought up to like think of like our indigenous side as like less than, because that's what we kind of like were we there's still that trauma like in our community of like having everything, just like removed from us. But yeah, the communities have been really like resilient and keeping all that knowledge. And there is this really beautiful like consigna from Cuauhtemoc, who's like the last, I don't want to say emperor because it's like very Western. He was like the last Latuani, which is like the like, you know, like head of like the chief of like the whole Mexica community. And it's really beautiful because it says right there in the consigna, like, let's like hide everything and like keep this knowledge, keep teaching it to our children and our children through their children. And that's the way, we're going to survive. And I think that's very powerful. And that's what we have been doing. And I'm glad that that's been uh, like unfolding more. And I see more and more of that, especially in like first generations here in the United States, so that have like identified themselves more with like their indigenous side. And that's really awesome. So I'm glad that all of that is coming back. And that, yeah, in its time, I think there was a prophecy that it's like we're on like the sixth sun, which means that we're entering like another era, like another sun, because that's what our like ancestors were looking at. They were looking at, the movements of the sun, of the stars, and they were able to figure out that the sun has like cycles. So we're entering like a new era where like everything is coming back. So it's a really exciting time actually. And there's no wonder that is we're going through a pandemic, because we're going through like a whole shifting of our perception. And that's really interesting. So
So interesting. And I love how you tied in all of these like myth and what's actually going on today, like myth and current events.
mhm.
And I think something you said to me that you were interested about talking
Mhm.
on the podcast was decolonizing design.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
when I heard that, I got so excited because when I think about decolonizing, I think of one of my favorite authors, Don Miguel Ruiz, which
Yes.
he's a Toltec and he explains it
Mhm.
super simply. It basically means undomesticating yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, we've been talking about how my parents were telling me my grandma's crazy because she's a native and she's doing these like plant medicine rituals and doing, things that they said was witchcraft. But she
Mm-hmm.
thinks she's a witch, but she's crazy because witchcraft is not real. Again, a
Mm-hmm.
lawyer and a chemist. So, very type A, Western minded.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, the colonizing is just kind of me giving myself the chance of like, hey, I saw this work for her and I saw this work for them in whatever capacity that was. And then I can make my own mind up of, hey, what elements of these two buckets of thought do I want to incorporate into my life? And that's
Right.
basically how I see it. I would love to hear how you see this idea of decolonization.
Well, yeah, I think so. I think it's like a word that gets thrown around a lot, but it's like very necessary like these days. And yeah, like I've been focusing on like decolonizing myself and everything that I like do. And because I realized um, I'm formally trained as a designer. I got a BFA in like a university and institution, and I got a pretty well-rounded education, but like I did see that it's like design is kind of like very Western. It's very like everything is from like Europe, and in fact, you know, the whole design education system in the United States came out of like these European movements of the arts and crafts and the Bauhaus in Germany. And once, you know, the Bauhaus got shut down by the Nazis, like all of those teachers moved to other places and most of them came to the United States. And that's why we have that system here in art schools and like design schools where you get to learn like a bunch of different um, crafts. So like I was a design major, but I had to do like ceramics and I had to do like metalsmithing. I had to do like printmaking and all these other like disciplines that like really form you into like thinking like about different ways, which is good. But I never like it's not very like inclusive to like other cultures like all over the world. Like it's just like very, and it's still, you know, in design, like a lot of like the big designers come from Europe. And you know, a lot of the trends that we see, we're always looking at what Europeans are doing because that's like the newest cool thing. And we have all this like knowledge and all this like beautiful culture like tradition behind us that we haven't really taken a look at and try to like understanding it. So yeah, and I got a lot of, I mean, after that trip, like I was really like shaken because it was very it was very eye-opening for me. And it was like because I kind of got jealous because I was like, oh, that's really beautiful, like, you know. And they did ask me, they were like, well, do you know anything about like your ancestors, like your the Aztecs, have you been to an Aztec ceremony? And I was like, no. And I was kind of ashamed because I didn't know anything and I didn't know anything about myself. So I made it into a point to like try to find uh, more about like my ancestry, like my roots. And yeah, luckily I found a community of like danzantes, and the danza community here in New York is like very big and very like welcoming. And that's why and I started noticing around me, and like a lot of like people that come from other places here are indigenous. Like they come from like the pueblos in Mexico and Central America, and they speak, you know, all of their own languages. And I hear them when I'm walking, like I can hear, and I'm like, wow, you know, like that's crazy. Like I didn't think, you know, that I was so close to that and I couldn't see that. So yeah, I've been, you know, it's been a journey. Like I've been learning a lot about like mostly like Mexica, because also when I came back from my trip and I was really like moved and I was ready to like look for like my ancestors, I ran into like um this woman who was like an um like she was like an anthropologist from Mexico, and she was like, "You're a designer, I'm gonna do this whole presentation for you." And she spoke a lot about like how artisans in Mexico and all over the place get like really like ripped off, you know, by their designs. And that made me like more aware and like more conscious about like, well, you know, if I can't just like claim to be indigenous, like if I'm not from like a specific place, but I can connect and with some of like the things that I like know, the things that are like in the memory. And the Mexica and the Mexica is the thing that like call me, I think, the most. And especially in like danza, and especially, and I started, you know, using some of that in my informing like my actually like my work. And it's, and I think they love it. I think, yeah, the ancestors, they want to be out there and they want to be seen by everyone. Like whenever I post an image of like a Quetzalcoatl, like I'm not surprised that I get like a lot of like people commenting and like liking it, because it's in that whole thing, it's in our memory. And we're, when we're seeing that, we're like recognizing that that's part of us. So I'm, while I'm doing this, I'm kind of like, you know, rescuing a part of me that was kind of like taken away and was hidden, and reclaiming that. So it's not like, you know, so that's not a bad thing. And I am, you know, I do identify like as indigenous, and just not, I don't feel like I can claim to be like Raramuri or like any specific group, because I'm not, I don't know my connection to that. But I do know that I have indigenous in me, and that I am proud of that too. So
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. And I just want to say that my experience of connecting with my ancestry,
mhm,
I, of course, went a very scientific route where I was like, I'm going to do my
mhm.
DNA analysis.
Yeah.
And I knew that I was mainly Mexican, but I was very interested to find out all of the other percentages. They were really not that small. I mean, they were significant in there in all of the different lineages that I am part of. Like, I have lots of South African in like from Congo, all of these crazy ancestors back there. And
Wow, that's
yeah,
amazing.
Portugal, Spain, but then even
Wow.
weird places like Southeast Asia and
Mhm.
Greece.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's just crazy to think
Yeah.
that maybe, I'm like, okay, maybe I don't feel super connected to my Mexican side for some reason, but maybe I hear some. Oh, I love drum circles. So African drum
Mhm.
circles, like really call to me. And I always kind of wondered why, but when I saw my DNA, I was like, that makes sense. And maybe that sounds
Yeah.
stupid, but that's how it felt.
Yeah. That's true. Oh, that's so interesting. I've never taken one of those, but like, yeah, that's something to like look into. And yeah, I'm glad you were able to take it and experience that. And yeah, a lot of people in Mexico, and like, yeah, there's also like a lot of like mixing with like different cultures that came, like, and especially from like Africa. And yeah, Mexico also has like a whole like history there with like Africa and like that people that came in. It's kind of like, but I feel like sometimes like we're not very like happy to like recognize that. We're still very like not accepting like or blackness or like or African. Like we're very like we're still like kind of like in denial. But yeah, there is that history. Like my partner, he knows he's got African ancestry. And yeah, he can trace it back. And yeah, and it's like he's proud of it. Like he doesn't hide it. Like he's like, yeah, I am, I know that I have this part of me. And that's, yeah, that's great. And but yeah, but I do feel like we still like, I think, yeah, like Mexico has a long way to like recognize it more. And yeah.
Yes. I don't know if this is racism, but when I
Mhm.
lived there,
Yeah.
I was a
Yeah.
person that was like, I am never like, I was always putting sunblock on because I was supposed to not
Hmm.
get tan. Where then
Yeah.
I moved to the US and everybody was like paying money to go get in a tanning booth. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's going
Hmm.
on?
Even people like in my family, like yeah, they were very like anti-black, and it's like it, it's not that way anymore. We have to recognize that it's not. And I knew since I was very little, like I would like hear things, and I was like, why are they talking like that? Like that's not true. These are people. I like it was really funny that since I was like 6, like I knew when people were saying racist things like my like little stuff, I was always like, that's wrong. Like why are they saying that? Like it's like
The
very,
body knows, the
yeah,
intuition
I
knows. Yeah.
knew. Yeah. Since I was, yeah, I knew. But
And I wanted to ask you a question, if I may, about your experience in art school. You describe it as it was very European centered. And what
mm-hmm.
I thought was interesting was that even though you're doing design, they're telling you, like, no, go do a craft so that
Mm-hmm.
you can basically learn another language. So that's
Mm-hmm.
interesting that that's the way they diversified the program. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
really interested to find out how you diversified that knowledge that you were, given during your time in school, and
Mm-hmm.
then you have this realization of like, hey, I have all this heritage, these people are doing things differently. The way I see that is like I have this whole other bucket of inspiration to pick out of when I go do my design. So I would love if you could tell me how that process was for you.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, I realized it was like very like European and very like, and like I didn't like realize it until like much later, until like now that I'm like a professional and like I'm working in places, like it's like it has been like a challenge. But I met this really amazing woman who runs a whole program actually on decolonizing design, and she came and she gave a lecture at this school, and like the new school, like the Parsons School of Design. And she had this whole thing about like decolonizing design, how like it was really um, European, and how like we needed to like move away from that. And she has like a whole program in Oka University in Toronto on like respectful design, and she explains the process of like how to like be more respectful and like utilizing the designs of like that are like sacred. She pretty much says that um, you kind of have to be respectful and ask for permission, and ask for what it means, find out more about what each thing like means. So that's what I kind of have been doing in my work, like just informing myself as much and getting like as much knowledge on like the like even in the architecture in like Mexico, and finding out like the different like energies, which we call like deities, but I don't like that word because it's too Western. It's like the like the energies, like the Tlaloc and the Quetzalcoatl and the four directions, they're like their energies because they're forces in the universe that are like represented in all these like codexes and imagery that like our ancestors used on like clothing, on like statues, on like the pyramids. And if you go to Mexico to like the like Teotihuacan, like which is like really amazing. You can see like all these engravings of like the Quetzalcoatl and like the butterfly, and there's all these like things that were like imprinted in there that were left behind for us to like make sense of it now. So going back and actually going through all of that has been really informative, and informing myself through like the art, the like codexes, and trying to like find out more, read. I read a lot of like on like Mesoamerican art, like I'm like a Mesoamerican nerd. Like I love to like read, and I like to read more from like the indigenous perspective, because sometimes like in academia, like it's also kind of like distorted, and a lot of the information is out there is like not very true and not very accurate. Like the whole history of like human sacrifices, like that's been very like misrepresented, and like I didn't actually know that that wasn't true. And it's been, and yeah, and if you talk to like anybody in academia, they're like, yeah, you know, there's proof, like there's knowledge. But what people don't know is that when the colonizers like arrived, they arrived during the time of like justice, which is called like toshkat, which is like the this like cycle where they had to like make justice, or anything that you did like, through like the year, like you will go get hold accountable for. And yeah, a lot of people would die, and a lot of people that committed crimes. And this is why, you know, like these things got blown out of proportion, just to like make us like look like savages and like animals. And that's why, you know, we have that concept now, and it's like totally like not true. And it took me a lot to like realize that, and actually like just investigate more for myself. Like I follow a lot of the work of um, this like ethnographer who lives in Mexico, Arturo Mesa, and he writes a lot about that, about how like, you know, the knowledge has been passed on through generations, through like, you know, the ancestors, and like the indigenous people that are still in some areas in Mexico, like still hold on to that knowledge. So he goes and he does research, and he realizes it and puts it together. And yeah, it's like a lot of the things that he writes about is like very accurate. So that's going to like sources that are like also like trustworthy have been like also very useful. Yeah, and that informs like a lot of like my design decisions, like the things that I like do, and the things that I'm like inspired by. Like I like to do a lot of my own interpretation of all these like, you know, energies that like exist, because they kind of speak to me, and I feel that they want to be recognized, they want us to remember them. And yeah, especially nowadays with like the newer generations that are more awake and more alive.
And yet they're so much further away from that knowledge. It feels like, at least I think that, because I see like teenagers in my family or little kids, they are just glued to this screen. And honestly, this is a very biased thing to say, but I think most of the content they're going through is kind of garbage. You know, it's like super empty. It's like, what's going on? Like, there is no. I remember being a kid, and like the stories I was like listening to were like mythology, of course, for kids, but they were like, it seemed deeper. Now there's like 300 million different cartoons on Netflix, and some of them don't even make sense. They just like squeak and they're very colorful, but I don't know that they're conveying any type of like ancestral wisdom of any kind. But maybe those were like the bacteria ancestors that are, you know, inspiring these artists. I have no idea. It's the
Yeah.
amoeba knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah, kids these days. But no, it's sort of like, yeah, it's sort of beautiful to see like how like empowering like all these like young children are, you know. When the movie Coco came out, like I was kind of like, you know, it's from Pixar, and like yeah, a lot of kids like felt empowered by it, and that's not such a terrible thing. And we're proud of like their heritage and their culture, and like that's, yeah, that's kind of like probably why it was made in the first place. It was kind of like had a positive effect, I think.
That's such a great reflection, because when that movie came out, I was like, oh, yeah, look at these fuckers. You know, they're stealing Mexican traditions and like
Hmm.
making millions of dollars from it.
Yeah,
But after, you know, getting that rage out,
and they did, yeah, yeah, and
I
they did
did
do it
see.
respectfully. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, you're right. They totally did do it respectfully. And the thing that I found the most beautiful about them doing that, that was that a lot of people ended up approaching me about it and
Hmm.
telling me how cool they thought it was that in Mexico, in Mexican culture, we celebrate death. And, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people were like, I think that's really weird, but I could see how it's so beautiful and helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And hearing those reflections really made me think like, all right, like that person back there that was like saying like these mother effers and whatever, like that person can chill out, because I know that really everything is serving a purpose. And this is something I feel a lot as an artist. We
Mm-hmm.
all need inspiration, and creativity is you're creating something new, but you're getting it from all of these other components. And then you're kind of alchemizing it into your
Mm-hmm.
own thing inside of you. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
when I first started going at this a long, long time ago, I would get so mad when I would make something and then somebody would copy me. I would be so mad.
Mm-hmm.
But now, after so many decades of doing this, I really feel like good thing they copied me, because at this point in my career, I'm making all kinds of wacko shit. So the fact that you think that copying my crazy shit is cool, like fuck yeah, the world is moving in the right direction.
Yeah, yeah. All you have to do is just be yourself, and yeah, nobody can copy that. It's like, yeah, it's yeah, that's like very, which I yeah, I think it brings me to like this whole thing about like just how these like designs that are out there and that are keep like being replicated by communities are representations of nature at the end. Like there, this was all like their like cosmological like knowledge that they were like imprinting into like their art. And like I think one of the best examples is the those like embroideries that they do in over there in Hidalgo. It's like they come from like these like from the Huasteca, and they're like Tenango style. They're like very like beautiful and like very like it's got like all these like animals that are from like the area that are like around there, and they're really like nice and beautiful. And I remember this like there was like a whole like outrage because this company like Williams Sonoma was like trying to do like these like beautiful like pillows for like, and they were like selling them for like a lot of money. And like yeah, it's like it's that's ours, like that's like our tradition, like you can't take that away from us. And it's like because when they do, it's like messing up with the energies, it's messing up with the order of the universe, and that's what makes it like disrupts things in like nature. And that's what's like that's why it causes like such an outrage. And that's why we have to look at these things consciously and know where it comes from and like why people made it this way.
That
Yeah.
makes so much sense. And it kind of, I would say, like, for example, I love that you go to the dollar store here in the US and you can find all the saints and the Virgin of Guadalupe candles. And I went into a company a few years ago. Beautiful big company, 500 Inc. They're doing great. The HR person is killing it, but they're having a Cinco de Mayo celebration.
Oh,
And I walk into, they have it all decorated, whatever, like I'm over, like use the banderas, whatever. But then I go in and they have all these candles with La Virgen de Guadalupe on them. And I'm
yeah.
just like, oh my God, like that's so sacrilegious. Like my grandma, was, I mean, it still is like a huge devoted person to the Virgin. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, just seeing that was like, oh my God, like, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough.
And what kind of karma that could accumulate, like to give someone who's not doing it out of like disrespect. Like I knew that for a
Mm-hmm.
fact,
Mm-hmm.
but you just never know what something means to someone else. It's like nowadays you
Mm-hmm.
can't say like, oh, I want a rare beef, especially if you're in Encinitas, California, because there's so many vegans around.
Yeah.
Which I totally respect them, and their ideology, but it's again, bringing it back to awareness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the like version because that's like that I found out that it's like the like Virgin of Guadalupe. It's actually like a representation of like the Tonantzin, who was like the like or like great mother, that aquatique, which is like the energy of like the earth. So it's like a, that's why it's like such a motherly like figure, and that's why in Mexico we say we have two mothers. We have the Virgin and we have a real mother, and because it's Mother Earth, it's like the earth that is like, you know, or like we came from the earth, from, you know, and it's really interesting. And that's why it's there's no, it's no coincidence that like her birthday, it's right around the summer solstice, because it was a cosmic representation of like this earth and how it was renewing itself and ready to like clear up and give birth again. And then like a couple weeks later is like summer solstice, and it's the birth of the Huitzilopochtli, who is like it's represented by like a hummingbird, and that is stands for like, or willpower, like fuerza de voluntad, who is like the strength who that, you know, we call for when we need it. And it's like the, I think there's in Mexica world, the a the Huitzilopochtli was born out of like a ball of feathers from Coatlico's like that fell on Coatlico's breast, and then he was born, and he became, you know, um, this like ball of feathers, and he became a hummingbird. And then his sister got jealous and wanted to kill him, and then she like brought out her like 400 like brothers and sisters to like make battle with like the Huitzilopochtli, which is the energy of the moon, the what's it called, the oh, I forgot right now, but it's the Koyoshalki. Oh my gosh, how can I forget that? It's like the woman that looks like kind of like broken. That's why when you see representations of her, she has like kind of like these like limbs, and they're like all disconnected because she was kind of like broken. And it's like really like interesting. It's like a really interesting like perspective of how they were like looking at things, these like representations in nature, and things that were going on in like the earth and the like the animals, and yeah, the skies. They were really wise. I think they were really wise people, and they were like observing, and they had to be really connected with like nature and with like their spirit, and deeply like spiritual. And there's like there's like all these like whenever we have like a veintena, which is like the 20 days, which are kind of like months, but they're just like little like cycles that like go throughout the year because they follow the solar calendar count. So there's like 20 like 20 days in between each month that make up like the 200 and uh and 70 days, and that, and then 5 extra days are like where you do nothing. So each year, like each month, like there's like a ritual for like each little thing. And there's like people back in the days used to go out in caves and just meditate and just sit there and just like be with themselves. And it's like really powerful that they had all this like knowledge prior to like meditation like becoming so like popularized. But I don't know, maybe they just called it like self-reflection. They didn't call it meditation back then, I guess.
That's that's so beautiful, because what came up for me after listening to you was, oh yeah, they had all this wisdom about connecting to nature, and
Mm-hmm.
they had all this wisdom about being present, and
Mm-hmm.
they had all this wisdom about being with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like for me, those are three of the skills that have been the most helpful to me in my life whenever I've encountered serious adversity. And those were three skills that I honestly was never formally taught. Like nobody said that in school. My parents never said, like, hey, this is important at all. thankfully I did have my grandparents, which had older ideas and older knowledge. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things my grandma does a lot is just sit there and watch animals. Like if there's an
Mm-hmm.
animal or a plant, like she will not pay attention to any humans because she's just like laser focused on what's going on. So
Yeah.
that is something I'm so grateful for. And again, just those three things for anybody listening: connecting to nature, connecting to
Yeah.
yourself because you are nature, you are of
Mm-hmm.
nature. And just because you have a computer and this awesome brain that can come up with so many crazy things, you are still nature. And then again, just making that time for yourself without feeling like you should be working a second job because you're going to have to
Mm-hmm.
pay bills tomorrow and you need dental work and whatever. Let that shit go and spend 10 minutes with yourself just being. For me, the easiest way to do that is to connect to my breath because I feel like I have to be fixating on something. But God, so, so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. There's just like self-care, like it's such a, yeah, it's such a thing that we have forgotten about. And like I personally like to do like a bunch of teas, like taking baths, taking like long baths, and really like just take time to like calm myself down and just be with myself. That's is really helpful. It's like self-care is like very necessary. And I think our ancestors were like really aware of that. And it's like very interesting to see. And yeah, and that's all ancestral knowledge. It's like all the traditions that they had, you know. That's how like when you do a cleansing with water, it's like a bath with like a bunch of herbs. And well, it's not just a bunch of herbs, but like it's like a spiritual bath, and it cleanses you because water has like all these cleansing properties to it that
And
people.
even science has found out that
Mm-hmm.
water holds knowledge. Like water
Mm-hmm.
literally molecularly has memory. Like how
Mm-hmm.
exactly that works, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it's legit. So
Yeah, yeah, it's like yeah, it's very cleansing. It's energy, has
so,
energy in it. Mm-hmm.
so cool. So I have a question for you
Mm-hmm.
regarding design. I know a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people right now, especially creatives, are trying to make websites. And a lot of us
Mm-hmm.
know how to use, we know enough to get ourselves into that DIY mode. So if
Uh-huh.
somebody's out there has no formal knowledge about design,
Mm-hmm.
what advice would you give somebody on how to best think about the user experience for their website or their
Mm-hmm.
branding or whatever comes up to you in a way where
Mm-hmm.
it's more open-minded and will help kind of honor their ancestry and therefore keep opening those gates for themselves and others?
Yeah, yeah, I think yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's really interesting. It's like it's like user experience is like not like a very new thing. Like it's like a very hot term right now in like web design. But it has been around for a while, and it's like very it's like a process. It's like a process in design on like how to like do like research to like meet certain user needs and apply those and design a solution for like a product, which typically is like a website or like an app. And it's very it's like very useful. It's been like a very useful thing right now because it's saves you a lot of time and a lot of money, and especially now with people like producing things like very quickly. So I think if anybody wants to like build a website, they should definitely look into that. And how, you know, it's like a very like it's like a no-brainer. It's basically just asking people like what are your needs, like what are you asking, like certain specific set of questions to like meet like a goal. And that's how like once you're able to get feedback from people, then you're able to like realize and build things in a certain design things in a certain way so that it's easier for people to use a website. And in user experience we do something that's called usability testing, where you you basically just put a website in front of people and watch people, like how do they interact with it, and you ask certain questions and you get feedback, and that's so useful because if you ask people, people will tell you what they think, and that's very necessary. It's a very iterative process, and that's like the human nature of things. And I think before we had machines, we didn't know, how to interact with them. So that's why earlier in like the .com years, it was really difficult to like run a whole transaction through like a website, that I would just get frustrated and then leave. And I think companies kind of like realized that and like started like designing processes to like make it easier for people to use things. And yeah, that has a lot to do with like the human experience, and just being being connected and talking to people and reaching out. And I've seen that, like how it really helps. And I was working on a project for like a friend who's doing like a film, and she asked me for my help, and it was kind of like very like on immigration justice. And I got to interview like a lot of people from the community, and that was very informing to me to like know what is it that like people need most of, and what services like can we provide, what type of information are we going to do, because at the end, or those are the people that are going to be using our website, that are coming, going to be watching the film, and that are going to be coming to our website. So it's really useful, and it's really important to like have that in mind. And I'm really excited to see how um this like how we make it more accessible to like indigenous communities who like maybe are not so technologically advanced, and seeing making it more accessible. And that's a challenge in itself, like how do we connect more people to like technology to like do good things. It's like that's really fascinating, and I'm really excited. Yeah, but definitely like doing research and asking people what is it that they need, it's really helpful, and it really makes
I
a
love
difference.
that. I love that because what I heard was first, do the damn thing, put it out there, because without something, you ain't gonna get nothing, right? Or you're gonna get nothing.
Yeah.
And then once that's out there, communicate, talk, get curious, ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then, from there, cater to your audience.
Mm-hmm.
Get to know your audience so you can really cater to them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really important point because through all of my experience building businesses and seeing businesses getting built and communities getting started, it's funny how we just want to make everything perfect. But if we're not including the other and we're not
Mm-hmm.
asking, we're just assuming. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna go back to my homeboy Don Miguel Ruiz and the four agreements. One of the four agreements is don't assume anything, because when you assume
Yeah.
something, you take the power of making a decision away from that person.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something a colonizer would do, because it would just say, I know better. It looks better when I make it look like this,
Uh-huh.
or it looks better
Exactly.
when I make it say that.
Exactly. Yeah. I was just listening to like this designer who's like, he's like a really old, he's like the grandfather of like user experience design, Don Norman. And he said it, he was saying it, he was like, yeah, we need to like, come up with products that are going to be usable for everyone, because the design systems that we have right now are pretty European, and there's like the rest of the world, and there's different cultures that like need to be able to like use these things. So like, how do we do this? Like, how do we become more inclusive and more accessible to like like non-Western like communities? It's a necessity in design, and it's very interesting. That's yeah
So
that's
glad to hear these conversations are being had out there,
yeah.
because it seems so silly, but when you really get to seeing how deeply embedded the boxing yourself in system is embedded
Mm-hmm.
into the system, it's like, damn, that's a lot of boxes, y'all.
Yeah, I'm glad, yeah, I'm glad that there's programs out there like this woman that I saw speak, Dory Turnstile, sorry, she has like a whole program, and she talks a lot about it, and how a whole like decolonizing design, and she has like a whole movement, and there's different movements that are like happening even in like indigenous communities and First Nations. You know, they have their own like education, so it's really exciting to see like how, yeah, and make the effort. And yeah, I'm very excited to like see what the future generations make.
And speaking about the future, so we've been talking about design, and we're mainly talking about us in the 2D world in our computers, but now we're having this new kind of reality show up, which is virtual reality. And we have the big rise of cryptocurrencies, NFT art, and NFT art is being made for virtual reality worlds. So what do you think what is the future of VR holding for us, at least from your perspective?
I don't know. It's just kind of exciting to like see like how is this gonna like turn out. It's like very. I think it's just as long as we keep like communities in like mind and like not profit. Like I'm really excited to see how like these new technologies that are coming out are gonna like actually have a good impact on people, and a lot of things need to happen. A lot of like regulation needs to be like set into place, and I think us like the design community, like that's why we need to like decolonize ourselves and like start these conversations so that we can go and we can lead and we can be leaders, and like we can work towards like a more like humane system, and bring these things to like the table. So yeah,
Heck
okay.
yes. Heck yes. So I see
Especially
running up,
designers of color.
and and I don't know if there are many designers of color out there, but
Mhm.
if there aren't, and you're holding back because you're thinking like, hey, that's not my style, nobody's gonna want, or nobody's gonna like what I make. I would say that's something that I've said to myself before as an artist, be like, I like drawing snakes with like wings on them. Like nobody's gonna buy that, and it's like, so what? Like there is always somebody that is going to be into it, and you voicing your creativity, you voicing your own personal artistic voice
Mhm.
is what is contributing to the all. And really that's how you contribute to this process of decolonizing, because then somebody's gonna be like, hey, what's that? And then I can say like, oh, it's Quetzalcoatl, and they'll be like, what the
Mhm.
hell is that? And maybe they'll listen to one of the many awesome Quetzalcoatl stories, and they'll be like,
Mhm.
oh, that's awesome, and now I wanna like have this giant winged serpent in my living room to remind myself of freedom. So there we go.
That would be amazing. Yeah, yeah, that would be amazing. But
Imagination is a powerful thing.
yeah, it is. Yes, yeah. But yeah, it's really there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot happening, and a lot of like changes that like need to be like made, and a lot of like you know designers that like as like designers we need to like learn how to become leaders, and actually like lead our communities and be able to like stand up for ourselves, and especially in like this like system of education that is like not very inclusive, like yeah, it's like hopefully I have faith because I have seen like I was just on this like Latinas in tech like summit, and it was really beautiful to like see so many like women of color and like Latinas like just like leading like all these workshops, and so it is happening. There's a lot of movements happening in tech and in design and everywhere. So yeah.
Excellent. So if you can you think of any resources off the top of your head if somebody listens to this and is like, okay, I'm interested in learning more about how I can work on really opening up my mind when it comes to design, or my overall thinking.
Hmm. Yeah, there's definitely like a lot of like a lot of books out there. Like there's Design for Everyday Things by Don Norman. It's like a really good book on like just design. Like that's more for like user experience, but like if you like want to read more about like cultural design, there's a lot of books on like how to design for like different like cultures. And there's this book that I was reading on like cognitive like designing for like cognitive bias, which is like a really like interesting. And there I got it from like this like Book Apart. It's like a publisher that just publishes like design books,
Oh,
and they
wow.
have like a different books and design for cognitive thinking and design for like cultural design are like really, those two books are like really really good. And yeah, as far as like Mexica knowledge, like Arturo Mesa has been like one of my go-tos. His books are kind of hard to get, but like yeah, the knowledge that is there is like really beautiful. And anything, there's a lot of there's a lot of literature out there. Like it's just a matter of like getting like coming from the indigenous like perspective, and like always like knowing that like who like trying to find like the right sources and like the right, like you can start to see, like you can really like tell like the difference. Like there is this really cool um like it's like a really like old like scripture from like this like phrase like in during the colonial days, cool, like they were like describing like everything. It's called like los mexicanos por sus el arte like mexicano like por sus culturas, I think it's called in Spanish. It's like in Spanish, but it's like in the old like Spanish like language, and they're like really old, but it has a lot of like, even though like it's like written by like these like frails, like they were like writing a lot of the history that like a lot of the things that like they were like seeing. So like reading that and like keeping in mind that it's coming from like the Western perspective, it's like really helpful too.
Wow, those are all great resources, and
Mm-hmm.
I cannot wait to check those out, especially that last one, because like you said, it's like kind of like their journal, like this is what's going on. I'd be so
Uh-huh.
curious to learn more
Yeah,
about that.
yeah. I think it's like by like Bernardino de Sagun, one of those like really like like priest, the Catholic priest. Like it's kind of funny that it's like a Catholic priest, but like people were like documenting stuff and they were just like writing what they were seeing, and that's actually like useful. Yeah.
Wow, so
Hmm.
much knowledge, Itzy.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, for reaching out. It has been such a treat to talk to you. Honestly, what an honor and a pleasure
Thank
to have
you.
you. And I hope this isn't the last time we get to
Hmm.
talk, because I'm sure we could go off on so many of these
Yeah.
subjects for
Yeah.
so long. Un cafecito.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. We'll talk about this forever. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. And it's been really great talking to you. And I'm so excited.
Yeah, me too. And all of your links I'm going to have on show notes, as well as
Okay.
the resources that you just so graciously shared with us. Any
Sure.
last words for our listeners? If you want to, if you feel called, please go ahead.
Yeah, just I don't know, just try to like learn about your history and learn about more about like who your ancestors like were, and try to connect with them more. And if you feel called, like visit my Society 6 shop, and I have a lot of designs that I sell out there. And like I'm under Itzy Designs. I'm on Instagram as like Itzy underscore designs. So be sure to follow me.
Yes, make sure to follow her, and I'll make sure we have all of these on show notes so it's easy to just click and be transported over.
Sure.
Itzy,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much, sister. Mucho
Thank
gusto.
you.
And I hope you have
Mucho
such a
gusto.
great night.
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you.
Yo, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Mindfully Curious podcast. So grateful and honored to have the chance to do this and to share it with you. I hope that you took some inspiration, courage, knowledge, or if nothing else, a little bit of a fun time from this content. And if you did, I would love for you to take the chance to show us some love back. Hit the subscribe button, share the content with somebody you think would vibe with it. And I have attached all of Itzy's links in the show notes so you can follow her on Instagram and check out her work. She has so much wisdom and cool stories to share. So, highly recommend that you link up with her if you have any questions. She also shared a lot of really good resources, and those have been linked in the show notes as well. All right, kids. So happy to be back here with you, and I am excited to be showing up on your podcast feed on Thursdays now. No longer Wednesdays. Our podcast release date is now Thursday. So happy Thursday, or happy whatever day this is, whenever you get to listen to it in the future or in the present. Lots of gratitude, so much love, and I will continue to close out the show with the bird breaths mix that I made for the podcast a couple episodes ago. And if you didn't get to listen to that, I mentioned that I created this beat that has some really loud breathing sounds in it, so that hopefully if you need a little bit of inspiration to take a break and reconnect with yourself through your breath, let this be it. And again, I am not a professional musician. I just put this thing together on GarageBand on my iPad, so it is no masterpiece in any way, shape, or form. But again, all of my work is just meant to serve as a little nudge, whether it's just a trigger to be like, you know what, I don't really like this, I can make something so much better. Well, hell yeah, go do it. You want to share with me, I would love to help you share it with the world through any of my platforms I have access to. But if you don't and you really need a break, well, here you go. And I hope you enjoy. I'm sending you so much love. And before we get into that breathing, a quick reminder about doing things. Inspired action.